We are in uh, Sri Sharda Devi in her divine place, Swami Chaitanananda's book on the Divine Mother. And we read a little bit of an edgy thing with Sri Sharda and Ramakrishna kind of spending the evening together, spending the night together in their bed. And we saw Ramakrishna kind of sorely tempted and being and having that cause him to go into samadhi. So you can't pass the test better than that. And talking about the nature of their relationship, how they really became spiritual partners and really helped each other reach their ideal and to manifest the divine so purely that they're known as avatars or incarnations of God, and which speaks to something I've always really enjoyed about Sri Ramakrishna, Vivekananda, and the Divine Mother is I like the idea of an incarnation. Having come from a Christian background, I'm very interested, very, very accustomed to triads. So in this triad, we God literally manifesting in three, and which I think is perfect because each one of them, Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, and Vivekananda, really do have a complete self or a complete aspect of the divine that they manifest. And I have found it very useful in my life. And it's not always just a matter of pure choice on our part, but quite often just an inner inspiration that comes our way, uh, where one face of God kind of comes to the forefront. And nowadays, even I find that actually even broad, just as broad in the idea of religious traditions, spiritual traditions. This idea of a singular religion, uh, you know, which I've referred to. I didn't obviously create the word or anything, but the understanding of this Sanatana Dharma, this eternal religion, has expanded, and it's partly from Vivekananda, but the beauty of it is that I'm actually running into the idea in other traditions also. And so even these traditions can come to the forefront and go to the back. You should always be devoted to a primary, from that story that Ramakrishna and Vivekananda tell about, digging a hole, that if you're trying to reach water and you only dig 6 feet in one place and don't reach water, and so then go somewhere else and try and dig another 6 feet and another place for another 6 feet. If you had stayed single-minded, you could have dug, 18 feet in one place and gotten water. And so that's why cafeteria religion's not really the ideal. That's not what I'm alluding to here. But to have an ideal like, whatever your chosen ideal is, but to broaden that to include and accept everything, and to go and use things that are helpful to your path, to your ideal as you're going forward. And of course, if you have a guru, it should be done in accord with your guru's teachings. Um, but I'm finding now in my life just this broad view where it just seems like the entire experience of life is feeding spiritual life. The entire experience of being is teaching and growing. And I think we see evidence in that Avadhuta Gita also, with all of the gurus coming together, that anything looked at with an unselfish eye, uh, anything observed with a quiet mind, is a teacher and will show you something and lead you toward the divine. And so this is that idea of seeing God in everything that allows us to have this experience. And so here we have the Holy Mother, the Divine Mother, God as Mother, showing us an intense level of purity, an intense level of humility, and a powerful level of teaching without having to make yourself seen. She's working through the ideal of womanhood in India. And so it's her profound selflessness and service that she comes to us with. Her absolute self abnegation and her deep love to us as her children. Ramakrishna told her that at one point she wanted children, or just shared with him that she had a longing for children. And he smiled and said, don't be concerned. I said, I will give you more children than you can count. And so here we are, mother's riffraff, holding out our relationship with the Divine Mother. So we only had two more paragraphs to the section that we were reading last week on this experience between Ramakrishna and the Divine Mother. And I'm going to be a little bit edgy tonight because talking with a lot of women in spiritual life and at the Vedanta societies, I'm often brought to an awareness of a certain, what should we say, perspective, male dominated perspective of things. And I'm going to challenge something just slightly more, just to say I get it and I'm hearing it and I'm trying to learn about that bias and trying to undo it even in myself. And so we see it here because the Swami Chitanananda picks up and he says, "It is wonderful to hear about the human play of divine beings in this world. Their minds may dwell in the transcendental plane." And how do you dwell in the transcendental plane? To put this in kind of our speak, us here trying to get somewhere akin to that. The transcendental space really is silent mind, I think, from the little bit that I've poked at it and tried to experience it and tried to understand it. But when you go to a state, which isn't a state, when you go to the natural condition of mind, which is no thought, just pure receptive mind, like the whole mind is simply being spent on awareness, on this broad openness with no particular in it, that's transcendent. You have stepped out into a universal perspective that doesn't have a singular perspective, doesn't have a defined point of reference, but is just in an openness, and time is gone there because there's no change to observe. In silent mind, your universe, which is your mind, becomes free, becomes completely open. And so there's a sense of transcendence. You've transcended the world of objects. You've transcended the stories of ego. You've transcended your particulars, which bound you to your desires and bound you to your sense of need and lack. And all of this lies within you. All of this is yours by nature. And it's always delightful to remember that even if you're not feeling it, even if you're not aware of it at this moment, even if the mind is just grinding you to pieces at the moment, it's an assumption that you can make based on faith. And the degree to which you'll be successful is the degree to which you are willing to accept grace. How much are you willing to accept that you can do nothing, that there's not a reality to this ego self? And to that degree, you'll be able to embrace grace. And to that degree, you'll be able to give yourself permission to renounce or to let go of your story. And to the degree that you can let go of your story, or which is your sequence of thoughts or your collection of thoughts in the mind, to that degree, you find that inner peace. You have an experience of that broad self. And if, through that grace, ultimately, it's very difficult in this life for anybody to have that full experience, but we can get close enough to the fire to where we don't throw ourselves into the fire, but where we just really enjoy the warmth. And that's bhakti, where we don't want to become sugar necessarily, but we want to taste it. We want to be in the company of God. And Thakur says that that's the best path for this day and age, because really society doesn't support that level of concentration, that level of knowledge, because as soon as you step into society here, it's just frenetic, constant movement. He says it. Thakur says it's all about the stomach, which is another way of saying it's all about desires. The modern culture here, anyway. So he says that their minds may dwell in the transcendental plane, but they behave like the rest of us. Monks look at women as daughters, sisters, or mothers, but not as wives. Although Ramakrishna had a wife, it was not possible for him to maintain any kind of worldly relationship with her. For him, all women were the manifestations of the Divine Mother, and he never deviated from that attitude all through his life. And so for the men, this is the practice, to try and break that incredible whatever desire or focus or just tendency to see women as wife, to see them in an intimate way. And so just to practice seeing them as the Divine Mother, most definitely, but as the Divine Mother manifesting to you as brother, as sister, or as a mother. Those are the safest. And so that's what Thakur chose to do. He chose to see the Divine Mother in everyone, and often even worship them that way. We have several stories from Vivekananda seeing the Divine Mother in the prostitute, and even to the extent that he inspired them. You know, a couple of them um, uh, had been hired to test him, and in his company, as they tried to seduce him, his level of purity was so intense that they couldn't even buy into the lie themselves of seduction, and began weeping, and saw him as brother, and you know, he the whole time was seeing the Divine Mother in them, and was inspired just in their presence. And he said, you know, when he was young, that even if he saw a theater on the street, he would cross the street not to walk by it. And then he said later in his life that he had come to a state where he said, I could live with prostitutes and see nothing but the Divine Mother, have no qualms about a deep love for them in that pure way. So this is the goal for us in life, is to see each other as manifestations of love, and to have a love that transcends the body, because we know that it's unreal, that it's going to become potting soil at some point. And so we want something to outlast that. So in the next paragraph, he says, after repeated tests, Ramakrishna became convinced of Sharada's absolute purity, and now became eager to awaken her innate divinity. Purity and renunciation are the two wings of spiritual life. They help spiritual aspirants reach their destination. Christ said, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. And when I read this earlier today, when I was trying to find out where we had left off from last week, I read that, and this is where I sensed, and maybe erringly so, I'm not making any accusations here, but it was interesting to me because last week we only read about one test, right? And that was when Ramakrishna woke up in the middle of the night. Sharada was sleeping there on the same cot, sound asleep. And he looked at her and he felt a desire for her, and even began to reach his hand out toward her. And before he even touched her, he was in samadhi. Mother, you know, the divine had completely overcome him. And I was thinking that, I was reading that, and I was looking at this particular paragraph here, where it's all about Ramakrishna testing Holy Mother. But in the only example that the Swami gave, Holy Mother was asleep. It wasn't her test. She was fine. It was his test. You know, he was being tested by the Divine Mother, and passed that test, of course. But I found it interesting that, you know, that it was being presented this way, that somehow Sharada had proved her purity to him, and because of that, then he did all the rest. But I think there's no test when it comes from the divine. There's no test that's one-sided. So I'm not saying that Sharada wasn't tested, but I'm saying that Ramakrishna was also equally tested, and that they both proved themselves worthy of each other's attention. You know, that no relationship is one way. And so even though it's couched here a little bit like Sharada got all the tests and Ramakrishna was the one running all the tests, that doesn't play out in the example that we were given. We see clearly that Ramakrishna was tested, and that he passed, but he reached his hand out, you know. So it is a powerful urge within us, you know, this body mind identity, and it's the body and mind, that limitation, that makes us hungry, because we forget the fullness, we forget the contentment, we forget the wholeness that we are, by identifying with the contents of mind, meaning we identify with a series of thoughts and ideas. And that's what puts us through all of our moods, puts us all through our depressions and our anxieties and our whatnots. It's just thinking, just series of thoughts in a row that we identify with. We say, yeah, that's me. Yes, I feel that. Yes. Instead of knowing that we're looking at the mind. And it's very important to feel that separation. When we say we are not the body or the mind, we should remember that we can only be one of those three things that we always talk about. You can only say three things about yourself that are true. I'm loving, I'm kind, I'm compassionate. I exist, I'm wise. Those are the only three of the things, uh, adjectives that belong to your true nature. Anything else that you put in there, whether it's lust, I'm lusting, or I'm angry, or I'm jealous, or I'm happy, or I'm sad, none of those things are true. Those are always true of either the body or the mind. And it's up to your discernment to figure out where your current desire is coming from. Is it coming from the body, identity with the body, or is it coming from the mind, with identity from the mind? And so we see here that the sages are dwelling in this transcendent state, which means that they're not in the mind. They're not subject to the series of thoughts. They're not subject to the states of mind, which is just collections of thoughts that define them. That they're standing outside of the change of thought, but maintaining an identity, maintaining an idea of a self separate from the whole, as the observer, as the witness. So it's a very high state, but just a step down, like Thakur said, that, when he was coming out of samadhi, that he couldn't even say Om because it was so far down from where he was at that point. And so, but that he would ask for a glass of water, or think about the company of the devotees that would bring him down and bring him back to the body, so that he could teach and show and be an example to everyone, because he ceased being Ramakrishna when he realized God. And so he had to keep coming down into the body later on to assume an identity that didn't define him anymore. He was the divine himself, a hole through which God can be seen. So he said, yes.
I have a very basic, naive question. Why? I mean, I understand the purity and the lack of the lust part, but I don't understand the marriage part in this. I understand the service that one needs to do or have, but why? I mean, is this the ideal of marriage, that one is and that is the highest ideal? Is that what is saying? I mean, how does that apply to a couple who in marriage today?
Yeah, I think, even though it's a little bit of a big pill to swallow, I do think it's an ideal marriage. An ideal marriage transcends body, because the ideal of marriage is the wife living for the husband and the husband living for the wife, in the sense of helping each other reach their highest ideal. Mm-hmm. So in a healthy marriage, both partners are putting the other person's needs first, and so both of them are having their needs met and fulfilled. Right. Trouble comes when that balance isn't met, where the husband keeping some ideas of himself and forcing them on the wife, or vice versa. So I think in an ideal way, yes, this is an ideal relationship where both of them are so fully aware of the other, and their true needs, in their sense, spiritual needs and aspirations. Because that's the first question Ramakrishna asked of her: Are you going to be light to me, or darkness? Are you going to be, vidya or avidya? And
but then why would he want to get married?
Well, I think for this reason, I think for this reason, because I think that there's still a very prevalent idea that somehow, I don't know, I can't really say that, that marriage itself was an impurity. Like I talk to a lot of young men, even now, these days, from India, who decide to get married, and then they couldn't show their face at the temple. They felt so ashamed about having gotten married, like they had somehow not attained an ideal, or somehow they had failed. And I think that this view of marriage, from those who were spiritually interested, was starting to maybe get. I'm just coming up with an answer here, but that was prevalent, and that Thakur was wanting to say, marriage in and of itself is beautiful. It's an ideal. It's an opportunity. and it's a path that can in fact you can in fact have realization through. It is a practice, and it is a spiritual practice, and this is what it looks like. Because I think on the other side too is that people's view of marriage in the world. I know I grew up with it for sure in this country, was that I wanted to get married so I could have sex, you know, and so that was kind of the whole view of marriage. And I think that Ramakrishna, you know, the divine manifests this time to show us what an ideal of womanhood is, and what an ideal of manhood is, and what an ideal of marriage is, and even what an ideal of gender is, you know, because we saw through Ramakrishna's practices, for sure, a very wide uh, exploration of gender and what it means. So that would, you know, as far as I'm willing to say that I have a suspicion of a possibility to your answer, that would be it. But I don't know exactly why the divine got married this time. But it was interesting because you know, he even helped pick his wife, and he
Yes,
knew of
because
her.
then the other avatars like Rama, Sita, they had kids, and Krishna, and they had all had progeny. It
Yeah,
wasn't looked upon as impure, right? Because
yeah.
they were in a marital relationship.
I'm going to hold the same space, you know.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm not sure that there's a singular answer to it,
yeah.
or even an intention. You know, it could be just mother was like, okay, this time this is how it's going to happen,
Yes,
and
yes,
we're going to manifest this story this way, and
yes.
and it worked for us. You know, it's like, oh, cool, and now everybody feels involved. You know, everybody
Mhm.
knows their way, because it's interesting. I mean, Ramakrishna as a man and Holy Mother can be examples of not just a householder, not just a householder ideal, but they each individually can stand up as a monastic ideal as
Mhm.
well,
Yeah.
and to really show that the ideals of the two paths are not different, and that one is not shouldn't be considered superior to the other. That they both are necessary. Without householders, the monks go hungry, you know, and with that, and without the monks, perhaps there's some loss in the world. You know, maybe the obligations to family would be overwhelming. So Thakur just provides a singular ideal for everybody, in a way that doesn't lean one way or the other, really walks that middle line in a
Mhm.
very balanced and beautiful way. So her absolute purity, and how he now became eager to awaken her innate divinity. Purity and renunciation are the two wings of spiritual life. And so purity, again, I always like to go back and define that word, because it's so hyperly associated with sexuality, in at least in the Western world. That purity really isn't about sexuality at all. Purity is about no me and mine. So that to the degree that you can remove or reduce the ideas of me and mine from your thinking process, from your considerations of the world around you, that's purity. And the more that you can expand your sense of self, the purer you are. It's not about doings. It's a much deeper aspect. This purity is it's a principle. It's a very deep principle, and we've seen that all kinds of things can be done in either a pure manner or an impure manner. That it's not very often that it's actually the thing that you're doing that is pure or impure. It's not what you're doing with your life. It's how you're doing your life, and I think that's one of Thakur's real eye openers in the way that he lived and taught us, that it's not what you're doing. You can be doing any job, and you can realize God, and and through it realize God. You know, and that you look at his collection of disciples, how they came from all walks of life. Some of them intensely educated, and some of them not even able to write, you know, or read, and yet all of them coming to a knowledge of their self. And so this is openly demonstrated. So this purity, this selflessness and renunciation. Renunciation, what we again, my one thing I like to mention about that is pure renunciation isn't about the giving up. It's about the going toward. We're letting go of the red ball because we're getting a bigger blue one. There's the worst metaphor of the day right there. But anyway, we're letting go of things that are of lesser value because we are discovering and being offered things of a greater value. And so that's mature renunciation. We don't want to look back at things. We don't want ever to be tempted by going back and picking up what we have renounced. Jesus says a couple of things that are quite startling about that. He really laid it out sometimes, and in renunciation, he really laid it out. He said, "He who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is not worthy of the kingdom of God." So if you renounce something and then look back, like, oh gosh, I remember the days when, whatever, like that. That's you've taken your eye off the ideal, and your renunciation at that point is immature. It's unripe, and it's going to cause problems for you. The second thing that he says, a man who has renounced something and returns to it is like a dog eating his own vomit. So it's definitely not something that's helpful in spiritual life, to look back with longing at things you've left behind, that you've renounced. So the message of it is keep your eyes on love, keep your eyes on the ideal, on the divine within, and don't deviate from that. Do your very best always to be aware of the presence of the divine in and around you. All right, so the next section here is called Shodashi Puja. According to Tantra, the Divine Mother has 10 forms: Kali, Tara, Shodashi, Bhuvaneshwari, Bhairavi, Chinnamashta, Dhumavati, Bhagala, Matangi, and Kamala. Oh, we've got one with us tonight. Shodashi is also called Radrajeshwari and Tripura Sundari. According to the Lalita Sahasranama, Shodashi is the most benign and purest form of the Divine Mother. One can worship this deity in a clay image or in a young girl of about the age of 16, according to the Narada Pancharatra. One day, Kali became mad at Shiva and took the form of Shodashi, literally a 16-year-old girl and a paragon of beauty. The Divine Mother takes various forms according to time and situation. Creation, preservation, and destruction are all her play. When killing demons, she takes a destructive form, but she assumes a benign form for her devotees. All right, so we've kind of equated, and just as an illustration more than a statement of fact, that this Shakti, the creation, the maintenance, and destruction of all things, really is a thought. That a thought arises, the creation, it sustains in the mind, and then it destroys. It goes back into the emptiness. And so this mind with thinking, this mind that is under vibration, is the Divine Mother's play, the Divine Mother's manifestation. It is the power of God, right? And the still mind, the transcendent mind, the mind with no thought, with no vibration, and it is the same as Brahman, according to Sri Ramakrishna. He said pure mind and Brahman are one and the same. So mind with no me in mind, meaning a mind with no ego, a mind with no particular perspective, but a constant universal awareness without preference or aversion, is the same as Brahman, or can be defined as Brahman. So we see her killing demons, right? Demons are all of your attachments. Attachment is a demon. So that thought comes through your mind, you attach to it, and it becomes something that pulls you out, that takes you away from the divine. You get enough of them and they create a state for you. You're surrounded by demons, and then they carry you where you want, wherever they want. You become convinced of what you are, but you aren't that. You just think you are. So you're carried off. And so renunciation and discrimination are what kills the demons, slays the demons. So that's mother's power, mother's play. And so on the 5th of June, 1872, the night of Phalaharini Kali Puja, Ramakrishna worshipped Shodashi the third form of the Divine Mother in Sharada. Years before, he had begun his sadhana by worshipping Adyashakti, or the primordial power, in the image of Baba Tarini Kali in Dakshineshwar. Finally, on that new moon night in 1872, he worshipped the same Adyashakti in the living form of Sharada. Thus, he completed his sadhana by offering to her the results of all his spiritual practices. This important event awakened Sharada's divinity, manifested his own spiritual relationship with Sharada, and made clear the role that she would play in the future. By performing the Shodashi Puja, Ramakrishna signified that the Adya Shakti had taken form as Sharada Devi. When Sharada was worshipped as Shodashi, she was 18 years old, in the prime of her youth. The scriptures do not require that the girl who participates in this worship be exactly 16 years old, but she should be young and beautiful. The short meditation mantra of the goddess Shodashi is this: the form of Shodashi, the beloved of Shiva, is crimson like the rising sun. She has 4 arms and 3 eyes, and she holds 4 weapons: noose, goad, arrows, and bow in her 4 hands. So we've got a number 7 here for a footnote. Let me see if I can find the footnotes here in this book. See what's going to be said here. Anyway, we're not going to find them online. I click on it. All right. So just this idea, though, the manifestation of the Divine Mother being established here, that God, that he was placing her in a position for all of us as the Divine Mother, as the Shakti power of the divine. And beautifully enough, you have this in this marriage, you've got both represented. You know, when Thakur's teaching was done, he went away and Mother was left with the formation of the order and setting up the work as it would be managed, and how you saw all of the brothers of the monastery would go to the Divine Mother for her blessing and her permission and her advice on all aspects of how the order was established and how the work was begun and how it was carried forward. And so she took the command when Thakur's teaching, when Thakur's life had ended, and he had set her up for this. And she was worshipped as the divine. You know, it took them a while to come to that realization, the young men and the boys, which is an interesting thing, that shortly after Thakur's death, she kind of went into this space of kind of almost forgotten in a way, while everybody else kind of went around things. And it was only over the passage of time that they became more and more aware. And I think that's a statement of her humility. She never put herself forward as anything. She always just was something that was irresistibly attractive, beautiful, in the most spiritual of senses. That you know, all the respect that came to her was because she was due that respect simply by the way she was, what she was. She was that manifestation through which the Divine Mother manifested herself purely and completely. She was that whole true God as the Divine Mother could be seen. It was the new moon night, an auspicious occasion for the Falaharini Kali Puja. This special festival is also observed in the Kali temple of Dakshineshwar. The master made a special arrangement for privately worshipping the Divine Mother as Shodashi in his room, rather than performing it in the temple. At the right side of the worshipper's seat, a low wooden seat, beautifully painted with rice powder pigment, was placed for the goddess to sit on during the worship. They still have that at Bellarmont. I've seen that up in it's in a room that's above the shrine in Bellarmont. is where Thakur spends the night. They've got a bed up there with his photo, and all of his belongings that they have are up there, and of the Divine Mother. And so that little platform that Mother sat on is there, and in nearby are Ramakrishna's shoes, and the outfit that he wore for on the Kalpataru day when he blessed all of the devotees. And when I was there, when I was there in 2012 for Ramakrishna's birthday, they had a big display down in the big tent of all of these relics from Ramakrishna, and I was called up with one of the other brahmacharis at the time to carry these relics from Thakur's room over to the tent and to put them in the cabinets there. And so I actually got to carry Ramakrishna's outfit that he wore on the Kalpataru day, and to carry his brass pot and his hookah, or his I don't know what you call it, his whatever he smoked from, and all of these things, bringing them over to the temple. And it was amazing, one, because I saw what a slight man he was. I don't know if those things shrink over time, but if they don't shrink over time, he was quite a petite person. But the wonder of being able to, there's something that happens in you, when something that's been only in your imagination, something that you've only been reading in a book, and suddenly you're looking at it in your hand and trying to allow the mind to actually make that connection. I found it really challenging because it just felt like there was just something there. Like I could not understand that I was holding an incarnation's personal effects from their story, which is scripture to me, that their story, which is literally, the Bible of my life, to hold those things in your hand and to carry them was quite an experience, to see these things and then to read about them here again, even now, and to remember them. It's like, how could a mind understand that? How could you have that association without being that understanding in its true sense, without realization? You can't comprehend those things. You just stare at them, looking at them, and the mind just can't open wide enough to the implications of that reality, that wonder from it.
Can I interrupt you, Swami?
Please.
Can you describe some of the items for us? Maybe that's a silly question, but I want to hear about everything if you can remember. Maybe it's not that important, but I think it'd be useful for our meditation to just kind of, I don't know, kind of immerse ourselves in the objects. Maybe that's a weird way of phrasing it, but hopefully it has some kind of basis.
Yeah, well, see if I can remember them. Of course, he was wearing a shirt, a kind of a jacket type shirt, a green one, sort of a green velvet type thing, that he was wearing for the Kalpataru, that day when he was over at outside of Calcutta. Oh God, my ancient mind not working.
Kashipur Garden House one.
Kasipur, there it is. Thank you. Yeah. So the Kasipur Garden House, when he went out and just began blessing all the devotees, his disciples were all in the building or elsewhere, and he just began handing out these spiritual gifts and having people go into ecstasy and have visions of their own divine ideal, their highest ideal. And some of them were weeping, and some of them were laughing, and some of them were in deep, deep contemplation, as he just generously, freely handed out all these spiritual gifts to his householder devotees. That's just such a wonderful thing, that he didn't go and close the door and just take his top 5 disciples into the room with him and give them gifts, that he was outside with his disciples elsewhere and just gave freely to all of the devotees there that day. There was a white shirt, also very small. The neck opening was probably like that big around on it. There was a pipe that he used. There was a brass, what do they call it, kamandala or something that the monks carry with him. His water pot that he would take with him, that was there.
Kamandalu.
Yeah, what is it called? The Mandalu?
Kamandalu.
Kamandalu. Yeah, that was with him. So see, I think what's more on display here is my non-Indian background. But and then he had there were shoes were there, these little slippers that he had, and there was a bowl, his eating bowl was there that he ate his rice and dal from. What else was there? There was a shawl that was there. Yeah, that's what I remember carrying over.
What was the bowl made of, Swami?
The bowl was, it was a, oh boy.
Maharaj,
It was
they're
a
all
stone.
in the
Like,
Belur Math Museum now? The bowl
yeah,
was made of brass.
no, it's not, or it wasn't in the museum. Most of the direct relics like this were up in that room above the temple. They had a cabinet up there, and I was kind of, at the time, I was kind of surprised because the Swami that was showing them and taking them out, here, like I know in San Francisco, they have a book of rare books, and they were the personal library of Trigunatita. And whenever that room is atmospherically controlled and locked and away from anybody being able to get in there, and when they go in there, they put these white cotton gloves on, that are acid neutral, and you put a mask on so that you don't breathe any moisture into the room. And when you pick up the books, you can only turn the pages in a certain way. But we went when we were at Belur Math up in that room, it's like when you're just barehanded, just pulling things out of the cabinet with our hands and just setting them on top of the shelf there, getting them ready to put them into a plastic tub, which is what we carried over. I put that tub up on my head actually when I carried it over to the tent to be displayed over there. It was, I don't know, it was just an awe-inspiring day. The bowl, I think, was a stone, like a pottery bowl, sort of grayish in color as I remember it. This is now 11 years ago. But the jacket, I remember just being green velvet. It was quite worn from time, from age. And all of this stuff was quite fragile. But it's, just as a side note, this is kind of shows some of the difference, a fundamental idea in difference between American culture and Indian culture. Here, we handle everything with a sense of attachment. We want to keep it forever. We don't want it to go away. And I think that's why, everything here, we keep it freshly painted. We keep everything immediately repaired if it breaks. It's like this illusion of newness always, this illusion of presence. And it's really a sign of attachment. And in India, I wondered, because when you get over there, you see things really are not freshly painted. You can see lots of hand prints and hand grease on the walls of even in the restaurants and whatnot. And I was talking to one of the brahmacharis about it. I was like, well, why don't they paint all of this? And he said something very different. He says, it's its nature to disappear. He said, and in the process, it tells a story. You walk into this room, history has happened here. People have been here. People have sat here. People have used these things. He says, so everything in India carries its own story, as it goes. And I thought that was quite an interesting perspective, that age and things wearing out is the ideal, that's the truth of things. And the use of them does, in fact, leave our mark on them as we use them or eat there or touch that or walk by that. And buildings wearing out tell their story also. And I thought, if, of course, both sides have their ups and downs, have their pluses and minuses, but it says a lot for the way that we live in our own experience of ourselves. That you can see this ideal in the way that we treat our bodies as we age here. This constant need to look young, to color our hair, to Botox our wrinkles and to all of these things that we struggle to maintain that sense of forever in the physical. And there's a better way. The better way is to let it be what it is and to accept it, and not just a neutral acceptance, but a lean into it, embrace it. This body's going, and that's a beautiful thing. Old age, I sincerely, I talk about it a lot because I'm 58. I'm on the doorstep of old age, and I'm paying a lot of attention to that because I'm trying to prepare myself for it. I want to be able to be open to it and accept it. And this notion that age is grace, the body's falling is grace. It's become humorous, actually, in one sense, when I realized how much mother has to do to this body, how decrepit it has to get, that everything has to droop all the way to the touching of the floor. And their hair has to fall out, and the teeth have to fall out, and the bones have to be broken, and everything has to fail before we're willing to let go of it, before we can be forced out of it. We're that attached to it. It's like a child with their disgusting rag doll, that's has no eye and the head's hanging off and it's filthy dirty, and the child still clutches and clings. No, you can't have my dolly, you can't have it. And that's how we are with the body. And we should see grace in the fact that mother is helping us let go. She's giving us the opportunity to see its impermanence, to understand its real nature, and to realize our separateness from it. As this body ages, as it grows old, like yesterday, I walked around the lake and I was walking back to the car and I stepped off the curb. All I did was step off the curb and I hurt myself. My knee hurt. And I'm like, aye. And Greg was, what's wrong? And I said, apparently stepping off the curb now is damaging for me. It's like, so as we age, as the things of this world fall away, it's a sign of grace. It's the beauty of mother trying to make you aware of that in you that is not aging, that in you which is not part of that body that's aging. And that to me is the beauty that I saw. The sentence I told my friend Philip about when we were walking in Rishikesh, when I decided I was going to join the order. I told him, I said, in all my life, I have never been inspired to be old. And I said, for the first time in my life, I've met 5 people on this trip over these last 6 weeks, I think it was 6 weeks, that have inspired me to be old. And I said every one of them was a monk. They were wearing that orange outfit. And I said, I don't know what that means, really. But I said, it seems to me clear that that's what I want to do. And it's that notion, that moksha prana, a very old woman, and actually unknown to me at the time when I took initiation, she was within a year of dying. And the love that I experienced from her, the grace with which she shared her soul with me when she looked at me, was unbelievable, an unbelievable gift. Because that's what changed me, was looking and seeing that if life is lived right, you are ever more valuable with every day to the world, to the people around you. That the more that you learn how to love, the more you learn about your nature, your identity as love itself, and the more you can let go of this egoism, this idea of smallness, this idea of a body and a mind, the more benefit you are to people in a palpable way, not in a philosophical, oh, come teach me something sort of way, but in an experience of peace in the midst of so much struggle, as a reassurance to the constant love of the divine in the midst of so much doubt and so much hurt. To make someone aware that they are lovable, no matter what their state of being seems to be. To teach someone how to see that in each other is the greatest of things. And in the midst of age, that was more apparent than anything to me, because I lived in fear of growing old. I lived in dread of it. And it was the monks and the nuns that inspired me and showed me that old age is a freedom. It's not a restriction. That old age is a beauty and not a hideousness. And Moksha Prana, with all of her wrinkles and with all of her, signs of age in her face and whatnot, it was her eyes that betrayed to me a love that I couldn't find a bottom to. A love that inspired and broke something very deep inside and released me from a torment in my life, from a torment. And so know that your life is of value, your age is of value, your wisdom is of value. Your dedication to the moment is the only real thing, is what sets that free in you. To find that divine within you is what you have to share, what you have to give in your old age that doesn't require you to be able to walk, run, sing, act, anything. Just merely the way you look at someone is the gift of old age. For a life lived correctly, for a life lived in integrity, in discernment. And so that's where we are, and that's how we go forward. That's how we become what we are. The sun had set, and the new moon night arrived in a veil of deep darkness. Hriday was performing the worship in the Kali temple that night, so he helped with the preparations for the master's worship as much as possible, and then left for the temple. After the priest Dinu had finished the evening worship service, the Radha Govinda temple, he came to help the master prepare for the worship, and then he left. It was 9 o'clock in the evening when the preparations for the mystical worship were complete. The master had sent a message to Sharada beforehand to be present during the worship, and now she arrived in the master's room. The master sat for worship. The master finished the preliminaries and sanctified the articles of worship by repeating the mantras. He then beckoned Sharada to sit on the decorated wooden seat. While she was watching the worship, Sharada had already entered into a semi-conscious spiritual state. So without fully knowing what she was doing, she moved like one who is spellbound and sat facing north on the right side of the master, who was seated facing east. According to the scriptural injunctions, he repeatedly sprinkled sanctified water on her from the pitcher installed in front of him. He then uttered mantras and invoked the deity with the following prayer. O Divine Mother, Tripura Sundari, O Eternal Virgin, possessor of all power, please open the gate of perfection. Purify her body, her mind. Manifest yourself through her for the welfare of all. He then performed the ceremony of Nyasa. Nyasa consists of touching different parts of the body with appropriate mantras and mentally identifying them with the different parts of the deity. He then performed the ceremony of Nyasa in accordance with the injunction of the scriptures and worshipped her with 16 items as the veritable manifestation of the Devi. After offering food, he took some of it and put it in her mouth. Sharada lost outer consciousness and went into samadhi. While uttering mantras in a semi-conscious state, the master also went into deep samadhi. Thus, the worshipper and the worshipped became fully united and unified in the Atman, existence, knowledge, bliss, absolute. This is manifest in the way they've thought about each other and the way they taught us to look at them. When somebody would make a distinction, the mother says, am I different from Ramakrishna? Or Ramakrishna even. Am I different from the Divine Mother? And even Vivekananda, when he was challenged after the master and mother had passed, about what the work he was doing. And the disciples were afraid that he wasn't understanding the master's message. And he looked at them and said, do you think there's a difference between me and the master? They all three had this samadhi experience. They had been one. They hadn't experienced oneness, not at all. They had known one. They had known that they were the same. that there was no difference. It was one who was manifesting as three. And so this is the wonder, in Thakur, Ma, and Swamiji, when you sit in that shrine, you can look in Mother, you're not looking at one thing and then another. You're looking at the same divine through this face and through that face and then through that face. And you see in the clearest ways, you see three holes through which God was seen, three holes to try and describe an aspect, a divinity that could have a billion holes and still be not fully known, not fully seen. So you have the Divine Mother with that compassion, that humility, that unassuming meekness, and yet that power of renunciation that was in her, that fire to be able to serve without any thought of herself, endlessly, without a need for anything, to to nurture herself. And then Thakur with that burning renunciation, that amazing universal outlook, and that ability, that striking wisdom to see the oneness in all the teachings of the world scriptures, to be able for the first time in history to manifest the truth of each religion by taking them to their fullness, to their realization through the practices of each of those religions. And then Vivekananda, that paragon of action, that intense devotion and absolute surrender of himself to the divine, that fierce faith in him, that discrimination. Thakur said that he walked around like a drawn sword, that nothing escaped his discernment, nothing escaped his discrimination. He would accept nothing until he knew it. He would challenge Ramakrishna on things, would not just lay down and accept them because it was right to accept them. He wouldn't accept things until he knew them. And with that level of integrity, he became Vivekananda. And so these three faces of the divine manifesting for us and giving us this beautiful gift of probably one of the most well-rounded visions of God that the world has ever seen. And here Mother is manifesting it in her own samadhi, her own oneness. All right. Anybody have a question or a comment or an insight?
All right. I
Yeah.
just had something to, add. What you carried, the relics and all that.
Yeah.
Those, I don't think the lay people like us would be allowed to see. The ones that we are allowed are in the museum.
No, well, that's why I was carrying them. I was carrying them over to the display cabinet in the tent for everybody to see. They were roped off so that you could only go past them in a single file, so that there wouldn't be any kind of rush on them or anything. But they were there for everybody to see. They were there for everybody. So, I think they only come out on that. I don't know if they come out every birthday for Thakur or not, or if there's special things, but, they were brought out for the public to experience.
The green jacket was there in the museum.
Is it? Yeah.
It was. I saw that in the museum when I went.
Yeah, cool.
And
Yeah,
also mother's bangles. Yeah, mother's bangles. But I was told that they are not the original, though. The original are not there, but
right.
they were there.
Yeah, some of the things are copies for sure. They do that for security because I guess they've already had some things taken. But yeah, San Francisco too has their own collection of these things. Like in San Francisco, I got to touch Swami Vivekananda's robe that he was wearing in that picture when he's got the turban on and he's standing there like this. They have that robe, and I tried to. I shouldn't say this; I'll get in trouble even now. But I tried to put it on. It was just the arms are just too small for my arm even to get in there. So they had that, and they had his walking stick, and what else do they have? They have the turban The turban, though, they don't take it out anymore. I saw it only once, and they don't show it even to visiting swamis who want to see it. They won't show it anymore because it's made of silk and it's so brittle that just opening the box, you can see little pieces of it kind of disintegrate. So they leave that there. I saw Holy Mother, Sister Nivedita took dictation and wrote a letter from Mother, and then Mother signed it with her name, just Ma, in a red pen at the bottom. I saw that letter, and those things. And then Swamiji's Kalpina is there, and his shoes were there, and his locker, foot locker, was there also. That held his stuff when he came to the United States from India. That was found in San Francisco in an old Victorian house. It was in the attic, and the house had been passed on to other owners, and they were doing a renovation, and the person who lived there found this thing in there with Swami Vivekananda stenciled on it. And they did some research and found out who he was, and they called the temple and said, we have this thing. Are you interested in it? Do you want it? And of course, they couldn't believe it. And when they went over and got it and opened it and saw, these things that were in the photographs, it was an amazing find, an amazing event. So they have all those. And it was funny because, when Bellarmine was starting the museum, when they constructed the museum, they wrote to San Francisco and wanted all of that material sent to India for the museum. And Swami wouldn't send it to them. He said, what? He said, this belongs to the American people. This is Swamiji's gift here. And the way he was able to convince them was, he said, what if you put everything in that museum and it burns down? He said, we'll have nothing. You should leave these things distributed so that they will last. And so they got to keep them. But what the nuns did, I don't know if this is public knowledge, but I wasn't told not to say it. But what the nuns did is, when Bellarmine wanted the trunk. And so the nuns had one made that looked exactly like it. And then they took a sledgehammer to it to bend it in the same places that it was bent and crinkled. And they sent that. So the one in the museum in Bellarmine is a copy of the actual one that's still in the archives in San Francisco. So these games that go on. But the important thing of those things is they give you a sense of reality, a sense like it helps the mind to understand these things are not stories. These things are these were events, these were people's lives, that what you read in the gospel, these people were there. They lived and walked and breathed. And the stories were accounts of what actually happened. So when you read these phenomenal things, these phenomenal things that happen, the phenomenal things that said, when you look at a relic like that, it just see the material world. I almost use the word, which is all of our bad habit of referring to this world as the real world, like to see real world items available to demonstrate the reality of these things that happened, that these moments were true. It's quite encouraging, really something to see, something to experience. So
Doesn't it house the energy left behind, the soul left behind on that material object from them? I mean, that's why you have to burn the things, right, of the deceased. You burn that so that the body's just the attachment. But that was touching them. That was touching holiness embodied, like, to the purest degree. So that's a pretty amazing thing to be able to have, even though it's an object. That's powerful. That's a blessing to be able to see that.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I'm always a little squirmish about going into that whole world. Swami wouldn't let, before I joined the monastery, I used to shop at secondhand stores because I couldn't imagine buying a shirt for $70 when I could buy a whole closet of shirts for $70. And so I thought only naturally as a brahmachari, because in the center in San Francisco, the brahmacharis just wore white shirts and khakis, and those are available at thrift stores by the dozens. So I thought, I should go get some from there instead of the store. And Swami said, "Oh, no, no, see, that carries karma." And it's not that I don't believe that. I just have a different way of thinking about that. You bring that energy through association, through remembrance, and the truth within you is plucked, and that energy is transferred that way. Those things in and of themselves are things. It's the person, Thakur, that makes them special, and it's your knowledge of Thakur that allows you to see that specialness. It's not the thing itself. It's the divine in you and the divine in Thakur making a connection. And you can talk about it in that way. It can be framed that way, it can be discussed that way, and it's true in that sense. But it's like Thakur himself. There were people that thought he was just a crazy man, that he was just some homeless crazy guy that worked over at the Kali temple. They didn't give him a second thought. And then in the same town, in the same families even, you had people that knew of his divinity and who worshipped literally the ground he walked on. And so you see the ability to know these things and to feel these things depend on the individual, depend on the grace of the divine within you, of what you can see and what you can't see. The same with a holy space. You can have a person walk in there and feel nothing, experience nothing in that place. And you can have somebody come in there and be like, "Oh my God, the vibration in here is outrageous." The only time that thought of mine was challenged is in the old temple, when my mother, knowing nothing about it, knowing nothing of its history or anything, went in, and the very first word she said was, "My God, this place is so still." That I knew somebody without any knowledge or indication or predefined expectation, that she walked in and felt that atmosphere. So yeah, there is something there, most definitely. But it's the divine in you that makes you receptive. It's that knowledge, that clarity. I don't know. There's a mystery there.
I interrupt again.
No, yes, please.
I'll be really quick, but it has to do with what you just said.
Uh-huh.
I think that this is something that's really neat, and I feel like this happens to a lot of us. But my mom is not a devotee of Thakur Ma, but you know how we get those free bookmarks? Whenever you
Uh-huh.
order from San Francisco or Hollywood, they give you like a little bookmark.
Yeah.
Well, one time I got two Sharada Devi bookmarks. I don't know why, but they gave us two, and there's me and my mom opening the package, and I squirrel one away for myself, and she's like, "Oh, wow, this is such a beautiful quote." She's reading it, she's like, she looks just like my mom." She saw it's the I can show you the bookmark. It's the beautiful picture. I think it's like the most famous one, the one that's always used. I'll show you guys now. Give me just a
Nice.
moment. Let me see. I have it over here. There it is. This one, this exact bookmark. And she's like, "She looks like my mother." She's like, "That's so weird. She looks just like my mother." And I've
Uh,
seen my grandmother. In my opinion, I don't think she does, but there's something really sweet about that.
Definitely. Yeah. No, she saw motherhood. Yeah. No, I can believe that. I know several stories of Holy Mother being seen by people who didn't know her, and they all felt that motherly sense from her, that absolute lack of judgment, that absolute openness of acceptance.